The electromagnetic pulse from the dying Endeavor spread like wildfire through space. Ship after ship lost power as neural interfaces failed. Across 12 worlds, the faithful watched in horror as their god's divine radiance flickered and died. Yunji floated in the damaged command ship, staring at the ordinary gray-skinned alien who had once seemed to glow with inner light. Her mind reeled as memories came flooding back. Not the glorious visions she remembered, but the truth that had been hidden beneath layers of telepathic manipulation. "You're dying," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "All of you. That's why you came here." Fleet Commander Yanwu, she could no longer think of him as a divine being, raised his primitive projectile weapon with shaking hands. "You will not speak of this to others. Your homeworld is dead, isn't it? You needed our crystals to power evacuation ships, and when you were finished," understanding dawned in her eyes. "You were going to kill us all. Silence," the alien screamed, but his voice cracked with desperation. Yunji moved faster than he expected. Months of combat training served her well as she disarmed him and pinned him against the bulkhead. Without his technology, he was just another mortal being, weaker than her, slower than her. "How many?" she demanded. "How many worlds have you done this to?" When he didn't answer, she pressed harder. "How many?" 17, he gasped. 17 systems before this one. Always the same. Pose as gods, extract resources, eliminate witnesses. Yunji felt sick. 17 civilizations wiped out to feed Veltharian desperation, and her people, her friends, her family, had been willing helpers in the process. "The communication system," she said, dragging him to the ship's controls. "You're going to help me broadcast the truth to everyone." Meanwhile, on the planet's surfaces, the network of doubters emerged from hiding. With the orbital weapons offline and the faithful warriors away in space, this was their chance to act. Taehyung led a group of rebels into the main temple on Kithara. Without their divine glow, the Veltharian priests looked like what they had always been. Alien refugees with advanced technology. "People of Kithara," Taehyung shouted to the confused crowds gathered outside. "See your gods as they truly are. They are not divine beings, they are aliens who have been using us." Some of the people refused to believe, clinging to their faith even in the face of obvious evidence. But others, those who had always harbored small doubts, those who had questioned in silence, began to listen. Minsu stood beside Taehyung, holding one of the dead energy weapons. "These blessed spears are just machines," he declared. "They break down. They need power sources. They follow the laws of physics. Gods don't need machines to perform miracles." On other worlds, similar scenes played out. Wonho on Zerion broadcast his research to anyone who would listen. Hanul used his merchant contacts to spread the word between planets. The truth spread like a disease through the population of believers. In space, the battle had changed completely. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated now drifted helplessly, their crews struggling with manual controls they barely understood. The faithful warriors found themselves trapped aboard vessels they could no longer operate. But aboard the Divine Ascendant, High Archon Tailvesh was far from defeated. The massive mothership had been shielded from the pulse, its system still fully functional. "Prepare the final solution," he ordered his remaining officers. "If we cannot maintain the deception, then we must eliminate the evidence." Commander Hyon, no longer calling himself the voice of the divine, stared at the High Archon in horror. "You mean to destroy the entire system?" "The orbital bombardment platforms are still under our direct control. We can sterilize all 12 worlds within hours. The humans will find nothing but empty planets when their reinforcements arrive. There are billions of people down there," Hyon protested. "There were billions of people on 17 other worlds too," the High Archon replied coldly. "Do you suddenly develop conscience, human?" Yun stood in silence for a long moment. 3 years ago, he had joined these aliens because he was angry, bitter, convinced that his own species had betrayed him. But watching the fanatic devotion of beings like Yunji, seeing how completely innocent people had been manipulated, he remembered why he had become a soldier in the first place. "Yes," he said quietly, "I think I do." Before the High Archon could react, Hyun drew his sidearm and shot him. Alarms immediately began wailing throughout the ship, but Hyun was already moving toward the communication controls. "This is Commander Hyun Park to all faithful warriors," he broadcast on all frequencies. "The beings you worship as gods are aliens called Veltharians. They are refugees whose homeworld is dying. They have used you, manipulated you, and now they plan to kill you all to hide their crimes. His transmission was interrupted as security forces stormed the bridge. Hyun fought them desperately, buying as much time as possible. 17 worlds. He shouted into the communicator even as energy beams burned into his body. They've done this to 17 civilizations before you. Don't let them add yours to the list. The transmission cut off as Hyun fell, but his words had been heard across the system. The final illusion was shattered. On her crippled ship, Yoonji heard the broadcast and felt a mixture of vindication and rage. The human who had helped deceive them had found redemption in his final moments. Now it was her turn. She activated every communication system she could reach, broadcasting on frequencies she knew her people would hear. Warriors of the faith, she said, her voice carrying across space to every ship in the fleet. We have been deceived. The Starwalkers are not gods. They are dying aliens who used our devotion to exploit us. They planned to kill us all when they finished stealing our world's resources. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ship after ship reported the same thing. Crews turning against their Veltharian officers, taking control of their vessels, demanding answers. But the greatest response came from the planets themselves. Across 12 worlds, the faithful masses who had been left behind while their warriors went to space rose up against their alien overlords. Temples were stormed, weapons caches seized, Veltharian installations destroyed. On Kithara, Do-hyun stood in the ruins of what had once been a temple. His daughter had broadcast the truth from space, and now his people were free. But the cost had been terrible. Families divided, neighbors turned against each other, entire communities built on lies. What happens now? Someone asked him. Do-hyun looked up at the sky, where the lights of battle still flickered among the stars. Now we rebuild, he said, and we make sure this never happens to anyone else. In space, the surviving Veltharian forces made one final desperate attempt to complete their mission. The Divine Ascendant, now under emergency command, began charging its primary weapons for a planetary bombardment. But they had underestimated the determination of the people they had deceived. Yoonji coordinated the attack, using captured ships and their own knowledge of Veltharian technology against them. All vessels, this is Yoonji, she broadcast to the converted fleet. We were their faithful servants. We know their weaknesses. Use that knowledge. The final battle was brief but vicious. Ships that had once fought side by side turned their weapons against the mothership. The Divine Ascendant's shields held for a while, but eventually, even they failed under the concentrated assault. This is for all the worlds you destroyed, Yoonji whispered as she fired the killing shot. The massive alien ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire system. The few remaining Veltharian vessels surrendered or fled into deep space. In the weeks that followed, human rescue ships finally arrived in the Kepler sector. They found a system in chaos, 12 worlds trying to rebuild after having their entire belief systems shattered, millions of people struggling to understand how completely they had been deceived. Captain Seung-hwan, now commanding the rescue operation, stood in the memorial that had been built where the Endeavor had made its final sacrifice. The inscription was simple but powerful. They stood against those who would be gods, and in their defiance proved the divinity of mortal courage. Yoonji stood beside him, no longer wearing armor but simple robes that she had made herself. Your Captain Minho saved us all, she said quietly. Without his sacrifice, we would never have seen the truth. He would be proud to know that his crew's sacrifice meant something, Seung-hwan replied. It meant everything, Yoonji corrected. We were lost, trapped in lies, ready to commit genocide in the name of beings who cared nothing for us. Your people showed us that real divinity lies not in power over others, but in the willingness to sacrifice for others. Across the 12 worlds, the work of rebuilding continued. It would take generations to undo all the damage, to heal all the wounds, but the people were free now. Free to think, to question, to choose their own destinies. And in the depths of space, word spread among other civilizations about what had happened in the Kepler sector. The story became legend, how a single human ship had shattered the illusion of false gods, how the faithful had found the courage to reject their manipulated beliefs, how truth had triumphed over deception. The Veltharians were finished as a species. Their homeworld was dead, their fleet scattered, their reputation destroyed. The attack began at dawn across all 12 worlds simultaneously. Massive energy beams erupted from hidden installations, reaching toward space like the fingers of angry gods. The Endeavor shook under the first barrage, its shields flaring as they absorbed impacts that should have destroyed a ship 10 times its size. "Evasive maneuvers," Captain Minho shouted over the alarm systems. "Get us out of their firing solution!" Pilot Jungkook fought the controls as more beams converged on their position. "They're tracking us perfectly, Captain. It's like they know where we're going before we do." On Cathara's surface, Yoonji stood in the command center of what had once been her village temple. Now it was a fortress of divine technology, its walls lined with targeting computers and weapon controls. Her most trusted warriors operated the systems with practiced skill, their neural interfaces allowing perfect coordination with the alien machinery. "The demon ship tries to flee," reported one of her lieutenants. "Should we pursue?" "No," Yoonji said calmly. "Let it run. We have greater prey to hunt." Above them, shapes began to descend from the sky, Veltharian ships that had been hidden in the upper atmosphere. They were beautiful and terrible, their hulls flowing like liquid metal, their weapons glowing with stored energy. "Holy warriors," Yoonji announced to her people, "the time of ascension has come. Board the sacred vessels. We go to cleanse the void itself of demon presence." Across the system, similar scenes played out on every world. Millions of faithful warriors armed with weapons they believed were divine gifts, prepared to take their holy war to the stars. Aboard the Endeavor, Commander Shungwan watched the tactical display with growing horror. "Captain, I'm counting over 300 ships launching from the planets, and they're all converging on our position. Ship types? Mixed. Some appear to be Veltharian vessels, but others look like converted civilian craft from the planets themselves. They've turned cargo haulers and transport ships into weapons platforms." Dr. Yuna studied the sensor readings. The converted ships are crewed by humans and other native species from the worlds, but their weapons signatures match Veltharian technology perfectly. Captain Minho understood the implications immediately. The aliens had not just given primitive people advanced weapons, they had recruited them as pilots and crew for their fleet. Billions of believers now served willingly in an armada dedicated to their destruction. "Incoming transmission," Lieutenant Jiwan reported. The main screen flickered, showing the bridge of one of the approaching ships. Yoonji stood at its center, her armor gleaming, her expression serene with absolute conviction. "Demons of the void," she said, "your time of judgment has arrived. Look upon the might of the faithful and despair. We are the sword of the divine, and through us the gods themselves come to claim vengeance." Behind her, Captain Minho could see other figures, humans, but also beings from other worlds in the system. All wore the same expression of fanatic devotion. All carried weapons that could destroy his ship with a single volley. "Yoonji," he said, using her name deliberately. "Look at what you've become. You're not serving gods, you're serving aliens who have manipulated your faith for their own purposes." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You dare speak my name, creature of darkness? I am Yoonji the Blessed, first among the faithful, sword of the Starwalkers. You're a young woman from a Bronze Age civilization who's been given weapons you don't understand by beings you've never questioned. They're using you, they saved us," she shouted back. "Before the Starwalkers came, we lived in ignorance and suffering. They brought healing, prosperity, purpose, and now you seek to destroy that paradise. Look around you," Captain Minho pleaded. "You're in a warship carrying weapons of mass destruction. Does that sound like paradise to you?" For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face. The ghost of doubt, the shadow of the questioning girl she had once been. But it passed quickly. "Enough words," she said coldly. "Face the light of divine judgment." The transmission ended. Immediately, energy beams began converging on the Endeavor from dozens of ships. "Full power to shields," Captain Minho ordered. "Return fire." The battle was hopeless from the start. The Endeavor was one ship against hundreds, its weapons designed for scientific surveys rather than warfare. But Captain Minho and his crew fought with desperate skill, using their superior training and tactics to survive far longer than should have been possible. Jungkook threw the ship into a spinning dive that took them through an asteroid field, using the rocks as cover. "We can't keep this up much longer, Captain. Our shields are down to 30%. "Keep us alive as long as you can," Captain Minho replied. "Dr. Yuna, what's the status on the pulse system?" "Almost ready, sir. But I need to warn you. When we activate it, the feedback will destroy every system on the ship. We'll have maybe 10 seconds before total power failure." "Understood. Sungwon, are the escape pods ready?" "Yes, sir." "But Captain..." That's an order, Commander. When I give the word, get as many crew as possible off this ship. The pursuing fleet closed in like a pack of hunters surrounding wounded prey. Hyunji's ship led the formation, its weapons charging for a final devastating volley. Inside the Divine Ascendant, High Archon Tailvesh watched the hunt with satisfaction. The human ship had fought well, but the outcome had never been in doubt. Soon the last witnesses to their deception would be eliminated. Shall I order the faithful to capture survivors for interrogation? Commander Hyon asked. No. Survivors might find ways to communicate with other human fleets. Better to ensure complete destruction. Yan nodded, though something in his expression had changed. Watching the fanatical devotion of beings like Yunji, seeing how completely they had been manipulated, was stirring memories he had tried to suppress. Memories of why he had joined the Earth Defense Force in the first place. Back on Cathara's surface, Taehyung and his fellow doubters made their desperate move. While the faithful warriors were away fighting in space, the planetary defenses were lightly guarded. This was their only chance. The main power coupling is here, Wanho whispered, pointing to a conduit that fed energy to the orbital weapons. If we can sever it, the weapons will go offline, Minsu finished. At least temporarily. They had brought crude tools, hammers, chisels, anything that might damage the alien technology. It felt pathetic compared to the energy weapons their neighbors carried, but it was all they had. Taehyung raised his hammer above the coupling. If we're wrong about this, we're all dead. If we're right and do nothing, we're all dead anyway, Hanul replied grimly. The hammer fell. Sparks flew as the coupling cracked. Alarms immediately began wailing throughout the installation. Keep going, Minsu shouted. Hit everything that looks important! They smashed and tore at the alien machinery with desperate fury. Behind them, they could hear guards running toward their position. In space, the effects were immediate. The massive energy beams from Cathara's surface suddenly flickered and died. Several pursuing ships lost power as their weapon systems overloaded. What's happening? Yunji demanded from her command ship. Unknown sabotage on the surface, her weapons officer reported. The blessed spears are offline. Yunji's face twisted with rage. Demon infiltrators. They have corrupted some of our people. But the brief respite gave the Endeavor a chance. Captain Minho saw the enemy formation waver as ships lost power and coordination. Now, he shouted. Dr. Yuna, activate the pulse. All crew to escape pods. Commander Seungwon ordered over the ship's communication system. Emergency evacuation. This is not a drill. Dr. Yuna's hands flew over her controls. Pulse system charging. 30 seconds to activation. The Endeavor turned toward the nearest cluster of enemy ships, its engines straining to close the distance. Energy beams struck its hull, tearing away armor and destroying entire sections. But still it flew on. 20 seconds. In the escape pods, crew members watched through small windows as their ship, their home, died around them. But they also watched with pride as Captain Minho and the volunteers who stayed behind carried out their desperate plan. 10 seconds. All remaining crew, brace for impact. The Endeavor slammed into Yunji's command ship at full velocity. For a moment, the two vessels were locked together, metal grinding against metal. Then Dr. Yuna triggered the pulse. Lightning erupted from every surface of the human ship. The electromagnetic wave spread outward like ripples in a pond, washing over every vessel in the immediate area. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Neural interfaces throughout the fleet suddenly went dead. Weapons stopped responding to their operators' thoughts. Shields flickered and failed. Personal armor became dead weight. Most shocking of all, the Veltharian bioluminescence was disrupted. For the first time since their arrival in the Kepler sector, the aliens appeared as they truly were, not glowing gods, but ordinary beings with gray skin and black eyes. Aboard her crippled ship, Yunji stared in horror at the Veltharian officers around her. The divine radiance was gone. They looked normal, mortal. What has happened to your light? She asked weakly. Fleet Commander Yanwu tried to maintain his composure, but without the bioluminescent display and telepathic influence, he was just another alien giving orders to a confused primitive. The first battle came without warning. Captain Minho had sent a small rescue shuttle to extract the reconnaissance teams, still hiding on the planet's surfaces. The shuttle, commanded by Lieutenant Suyong, approached Cathara under full stealth. No sign of detection, she reported over the communication channel. Moving to the extraction point now. But the Veltharians had been waiting. As soon as the shuttle entered the atmosphere, Energy beams erupted from hidden positions around the landing zone. The faithful warriors of Cathara, led by Yunji herself, had prepared a trap. "Holy warriors of light," Yunji shouted to her followers. "The demons have come to steal our paradise. Show them the power of the divine." The battle was horrifying in its one-sidedness. Primitive people who should have been fighting with spears and swords instead wielded energy weapons more advanced than anything in the human fleet. Their personal shields deflected the shuttle's defensive fire while their blessed spears of light tore through its armor. Lieutenant Su-young fought bravely, but her shuttle was designed for transport, not combat. Within minutes, critical systems began failing. "They're cutting through our hull," her co-pilot shouted over the alarms. "These weapons are incredible." "Emergency ascent," Su-young ordered. "Get us back to orbit." The shuttle rose desperately toward space, trailing smoke and sparks. Behind it, beams of energy followed like the fingers of angry gods. Hyunji and her warriors fired until their targets disappeared into the black sky. "Victory!" she cried, raising her weapon high. "The demons flee before our righteousness." The crowd of faithful warriors cheered. They had proven their worth to the Starwalkers. They were ready for whatever came next. Aboard the Endeavor, Captain Minho watched the damaged shuttle limp back to the docking bay. 3 crew members were dead, 5 more badly wounded. Lieutenant Su-young sat in the medical bay with burns across half her face. "They were waiting for us," she reported weakly. "Knew exactly where we would land, exactly how to position their forces. And those weapons, Captain, I've never seen anything like them. Personal energy rifles that could punch through military armor. Shields that stopped everything we fired." Dr. Yuna studied the combat recordings with growing alarm. "These weapons are at least 50 years ahead of our current technology. How did primitive civilizations get their hands on equipment like this?" "They didn't," Captain Minho said grimly. "Someone gave it to them. Someone who wanted to turn 12 worlds into a massive army." Chief Engineer Jungkook joined them in the briefing room, his face dark with worry. "Captain, we've got a serious problem. The Endeavor is a survey ship. We've got basic defensive systems and a few light weapons. Against what we just saw, we wouldn't last 10 minutes in a real fight. What are our options? I can modify some systems, maybe boost our shields and weapons a little. But we're talking about going up against billions of people armed with technology that makes ours look like toys." Captain Minho nodded slowly. They were one small ship against an entire star system that had been turned into a weapons factory. The odds were impossible. "Do what you can," he ordered, "and send a priority message to Fleet Command. They need to know what's happening here." But even as he gave the order, he knew help would come too late. The nearest fleet was 3 weeks away. Whatever was going to happen would be over long before then. On the planet's surface, Taehyung moved carefully through the darkness toward his secret meeting place. The underground network of doubters had grown, but slowly. Most people were too caught up in religious fervor to question their gods. Minsu was waiting when he arrived, along with a dozen others. But their faces were grim. 3 more of our people have been discovered, Minsu reported. The temple guards found them asking questions about the weapons. "They've been taken for divine judgment." Taehyung felt his stomach turn cold. Divine judgment was a ceremony where the Starwalkers decided the fate of those who doubted their word. No one who underwent the ceremony was ever seen again. "We have to do something," said Wanho, the scholar from Zerion. "I've been studying their technology, trying to find weaknesses. I think I understand how some of it works." He spread out crude drawings on the table. "The weapons run on stored energy like batteries, and the personal shields have limits. They can absorb a certain amount of damage before failing." "That doesn't help us much," Hanul pointed out. "We don't have weapons that can test those limits." "No, but we know where the weapons come from. Every temple has a production facility. If we could disable even one of them, the guards would kill us before we got close," Minsu said. "These aren't our neighbors anymore. They're fanatics who believe they're serving gods." Taehyung studied the drawings, thinking hard. An idea began to form in his mind. Dangerous and probably stupid, but better than doing nothing. "What if we don't try to fight them directly?" he said slowly. "What if we make them question their faith instead?" Meanwhile, in the Veltharian command ship, High Archon Telvesh reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction. The human shuttle had been driven off easily. Phase 2 was proceeding perfectly. "The faithful performed admirably," Commander Hyun reported, "especially the female leader on Cathara. Hyunji, I believe her name is. Yes, she shows promise. Perhaps she should lead the orbital assault when it comes. Hyan nodded, though something in his expression suggested reluctance. The humans will call for reinforcements. We should be prepared for a much larger force. Let them come, the High Archon said, his skin pulsing with confident colors. We have 12 worlds full of devoted warriors. Each one believes they fight for eternal paradise. They will die gladly for that dream. And after, when the resources are extracted, the alien's expression grew cold. After, they will no longer serve our purposes. The faithful have lived their entire lives on these worlds. They would not adapt well to relocation. Hyun understood the implication. When the Veltharians were finished with the Kepler sector, there would be no witnesses left to tell other species what had really happened here. The thought should have bothered him more than it did. Back on Cathara, Yunji knelt before the altar in the great temple. Her weapon lay beside her as she prayed, still warm from the battle. She had proven herself worthy of the gods' gifts. Soon, she would lead her people to even greater victories. Faithful servant, a voice spoke behind her. She turned to see one of the Starwalkers approaching, a tall figure whose skin glowed with soft blue light. She had learned his name was Fleet Commander Yeonwoo, one of the most powerful among the divine beings. "How may I serve?" she asked, bowing low. "The demons from the void will return soon with greater numbers and more powerful weapons. We need our most trusted warriors to prepare for battle among the stars themselves." Yunji's heart soared, to fight in the heavens beside the gods themselves. "I am ready, Lord Commander." "Good. Select your best fighters, those whose faith burns brightest. You will come aboard our sacred vessels and learn to wage war across the cosmos." As she left the temple to gather her chosen warriors, Yunji felt the weight of destiny upon her shoulders. She did not notice Taehyung watching from the shadows. His face twisted with anguish as he saw his childhood friend transformed into something he barely recognized. Aboard the Endeavor, Dr. Yuna made a discovery that changed everything. She had been analyzing the energy signatures from the alien weapons when she noticed something odd. "Captain?" she called excitedly. "I think I've found something. The alien technology. It all runs on the same base frequency. Some kind of neural interface system." Captain Minho joined her at the science station. "Neural interface?" "The weapons, the shields, even their communication systems. They're all connected to their users' nervous systems. That's how primitive people can operate such advanced technology. The devices read their intentions directly." "Can we disrupt it?" "Theoretically, yes. If we could generate the right kind of electromagnetic pulse, we might be able to interfere with the neural connections. But we'd need to get close, very close." Captain Minho stared at the readings, his mind racing. A plan began to form, desperate and probably suicidal, but their only real chance. "How close?" he asked. "Direct contact range. We'd basically have to ram one of their ships." "And what would happen to us?" Dr. Yuna hesitated. "The pulse would have to be generated by overloading our own systems. The ship wouldn't survive." The bridge fell silent. Captain Minho looked around at his crew. 43 people who had signed up for exploration and discovery. Not suicide missions. "There has to be another way," Commander Sungwon said quietly. "Maybe there is," Captain Minho replied. "But we need to be ready for the worst-case scenario. Dr. Yuna, start working on the pulse system. Jungkook, begin modifications to our engines and power systems." "Sir?" Lieutenant Jiwon interrupted. "Incoming transmission from the planet surface." The main screen flickered to life. Yunji appeared, no longer wearing simple robes but gleaming armor that seemed to be made of solidified light. Behind her stood ranks of similarly equipped warriors. "Demons of the void," she said, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "You have trespassed in sacred space and attacked servants of the divine. Surrender now, and your deaths will be merciful. Continue to resist and face the full wrath of heaven itself." The Endeavor drifted silently through space at the edge of the Kepler sector. Captain Minho stood at the observation deck, watching the 12 worlds spin slowly around their yellow sun. From this distance, they looked peaceful. The energy readings told a different story. "Stealth probes are in position," reported Commander Seungwon. "We should have detailed scans within the hour." Dr. Yuna joined them at the window. "The energy signatures are definitely artificial, Captain. Someone is using very advanced technology down there. The power levels suggest massive industrial operations." But our records show these worlds barely had Bronze Age technology 6 months ago, Lieutenant G1 said from the nearby console. How could they advance so quickly? Before anyone could answer, alerts began flashing across every screen. The ship's sensors had detected something new, a massive energy discharge from the third planet. On screen, Captain Minho ordered. The main display showed a city on the planet's surface. It was burning. But this was no ordinary fire. Lightning fell from clear skies, striking with perfect accuracy. Buildings crumbled under the assault. People fled in panic. My God, whispered Dr. Yuna. Someone is bombarding them from orbit. No, said technical specialist Hayoung, studying her instruments. The energy is coming from the planet itself. Someone down there has orbital-class weapons. Captain Minho watched in horror as an entire city died. The precision was terrible. Every military building, every government center, every communication hub destroyed. But the residential areas remained untouched. It's a demonstration, he said quietly. Someone is teaching the others what happens when you refuse to obey. The bombardment stopped as suddenly as it began. In the silence that followed, new signals began broadcasting from the planet. They were in dozens of different languages, all carrying the same message. Submit to the Eternal Ones and no peace. Resist and face divine judgment. Divine judgment? Commander Seunghwan shook his head. Someone is playing God down there. The question is who, Captain Minho said, and why. On the planet's surface, Taehyung crouched in the ruins of what had been the city of Thalkara. He had traveled here in secret, driven by questions he could not silence. Now he wished he had stayed home. The destruction was total. Not one building remained standing in the government district. The people huddled in refugee camps, speaking in whispers about the god's wrath. They had refused to give up their sacred stones, and this was their punishment. But Taehyung saw things others missed. The lightning strikes had been too precise, too controlled. Real storms did not work that way. And the energy residue left behind, he had seen similar patterns in the temple back home. You should not be here. Taehyung spun around. A man stood behind him wearing the robes of a Thalkaran priest. But his eyes were different, sharp, questioning. I am Minsu, the man said. Once I was a warrior before the Starwalkers came. Now I serve in their temple and try to understand what they truly want. You doubt them too? Taehyung asked. Minsu looked around carefully, then nodded. Come. There are others who share our questions. They walked through the rubble to a hidden basement where a dozen people waited. Among them was Wanho, a scholar from the distant world of Zirion, and Hanul, a merchant who traveled between planets. The god's power follows patterns, Wanho was explaining to the group. I have studied their miracles across 6 worlds. They are magnificent, but they are not random. There are rules, limitations. What kind of limitations? Taehyung asked. Wanho spread drawings across a table. Watch their healing ceremonies. They can cure disease, mend broken bones, even restore sight to the blind, but they cannot bring back the dead. They can control weather, but not perfectly. Sometimes their lightning misses its target by a few feet. Machines malfunction, Taehyung said slowly. Gods should not. Exactly. And have you noticed? They always ask for the blue crystals. Every world, every temple. Why would divine beings need physical materials? Hanil leaned forward. I have traded across many systems. Those crystals are rare, valuable. They power the most advanced starship engines. If someone were building a massive fleet, the implications hung in the air like smoke. If the Starwalkers were not gods, then what were they? And what did they really want with 12 worlds full of believers? Aboard the Endeavour, intelligence officer Suho made a discovery that changed everything. He was analyzing communication intercepts when a voice pattern caught his attention. The computer confirmed his suspicion within seconds. Captain, he called across the bridge, I've identified one of the figures leading the divine operations. Colonel Hyan Park, formerly of the Earth Defense Force. Captain Minho felt his blood turn cold. Hyan Park was declared dead 3 years ago. His ship was destroyed in the Proxima Wars. Apparently not, sir. He's alive and working with whoever is behind this operation. He's calling himself the voice of the divine now. Dr. Yuna joined them at the intelligence station. A human is helping aliens pose as gods? Why would anyone do that? Desperation, Captain Minho said grimly. Or revenge. Hyun lost his entire family in the Proxima attacks. He blamed Earth Command for poor strategic planning. So he betrayed his own species. It looks that way. The question is, what do we do about it? The answer came sooner than expected. Pilot Jamin was conducting a reconnaissance flight near the fourth planet when his stealth systems failed. The small ship suddenly appeared on every sensor in the system. "Jamin, get out of there," Captain Minho ordered over the communication channel. "I'm trying, sir, but something is jamming my engines. I can't." The transmission cut off. On the main screen, they watched as energy beams surrounded the small craft, forcing it to land. "They have him," Commander Sungwon said. Within hours, new broadcasts spread across all 12 worlds. The voice of the divine, Hyon, spoke to the faithful in every language. "Demons have come from the void," he announced, "creatures of darkness who seek to destroy your paradise. But do not fear. The Eternal Ones will give you the power to fight. Prepare yourselves for holy war." On Kythera, Yunji heard the message and felt her heart fill with righteous fire. The Starwalkers had given her people everything: health, prosperity, purpose. Now that paradise was threatened by evil beings from space. "We must prepare," she told her father. "The gods will need faithful warriors." Do-hyun watched his daughter with growing sadness. The bright, curious girl who had questioned everything was gone. In her place stood a fanatic ready to die for beings she barely understood. "What if these demons are not evil?" he asked quietly. "What if they are simply people like us?" Yunji's eyes flashed with anger. "The gods have spoken, father. There is no room for doubt." Across the system, similar scenes played out on every world. The faithful prepared for war while the doubters went into hiding. Taehyung and his growing network of questioners worked in secret, trying to understand what was really happening. In the Veltharian command ship, High Archon Tylvesh studied reports from his intelligence officers. The human survey ship posed a real threat. Its crew was skilled and suspicious. They would not be easily deceived. "Accelerate Phase 2, he ordered. "Begin weapons distribution immediately." "But the resource gathering is not complete," Commander Hyon protested. "It will have to be enough. These humans will call for reinforcements soon. We need our followers armed and ready before that happens." Strange new machines appeared overnight in every temple across the 12 worlds. They looked like altars, but they produced weapons. Energy rifles that fired beams of pure light, personal shields that could stop bullets, combat drugs that made warriors stronger and braver. The faithful lined up eagerly to receive their blessed weapons. Each one swore a sacred oath to defend paradise against the demons from space. Yunji was among the first to receive her weapon. It felt warm in her hands, alive with divine power. She practiced with it in the temple courtyard, learning to focus the energy beams with deadly precision. "The gods smile upon you," the Veltharian weapons master told her. "You will lead many into battle when the time comes." Yunji bowed deeply. "I live to serve," but not everyone accepted the weapons gladly. Taehyung watched from the shadows as his neighbors transformed into soldiers. The questions in his mind grew louder with each passing day. That night he crept close to the temple and listened at the walls. Inside he heard voices speaking in a language he did not recognize. But somehow, through gaps in their conversation, he began to understand. They were not gods. They were aliens, refugees whose homeworld was dying. They needed the crystals to power ships that would carry their people to safety. The 12 worlds were just convenient sources of labor and materials. And when the mining was complete, when every useful resource was extracted, the workers would no longer be needed. Taehyung backed away from the temple, his heart pounding. He had to warn someone, had to make people understand. But who would believe him? And with divine weapons in the hands of every believer, who would dare to listen? Above in space, Captain Minho faced the same terrible questions. His ship was outnumbered, outgunned, and completely alone. The nearest human fleet was weeks away. By then, whatever was happening here would be finished. "Options?" he asked his senior staff. "We could try to rescue Jimin," Commander Sungwon suggested. The morning sky above Kythera burned with strange colors. Do-hyun stood on the cliff watching the heavens split open like torn cloth. Golden light poured through the crack and something massive began to descend. The tribal leader had seen many strange things in his 40 years, but nothing like this. "Father." His daughter Yunji ran up the rocky path, her priestess robes flowing behind her. "The spirits speak of visitors from the star realm." Do-hyun nodded grimly. He could feel it too, a change in the air itself. The crystal deposits in the nearby caves hummed with new energy. His people gathered below in the village, pointing at the sky and whispering prayers. The golden light grew brighter. A shape emerged from the tear in the sky, smooth, gleaming, larger than their entire settlement. It moved without sound, floating like a leaf on water. As it descended, smaller shapes broke away from it, drifting down toward the village like falling stars. "Gather the elders," Do-hyun told his daughter. "Whatever comes next, we must face it together." Far above the planet, aboard the massive ship called Divine Ascendant, Commander Hyon watched the landing operations through digital displays. Once he had been Colonel Hyun of the Earth Defense Force. That was before the Proxima Wars, before he learned the terrible truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. Now he served different masters. "The atmospheric processors are working perfectly," reported High Archon Tailvesh. The alien's skin glowed with soft blue patterns as he spoke. "Phase 1 of Project Divinity begins now." Hyun nodded. He had helped plan this operation for 3 years. 12 primitive worlds in the Kepler sector, all rich in the rare elements the Veltharian homeworld desperately needed. Rather than waste time with conquest, they would become gods. It was elegant and efficient. "Begin the manifestation," Hyun commanded. On Cathera's surface, the first of the smaller craft touched ground in the village center. It was beautiful, all curves and flowing metal that seemed to shift color in the light. The gathered villagers stepped back as a ramp extended downward like an unfolding flower. 3 figures emerged. They were tall, graceful, with skin that glowed with inner light. Their faces were perfect, their movements fluid. When they walked, their feet barely touched the ground. Yoonji fell to her knees. Around her, others did the same. These were clearly divine beings, messengers from the realm beyond the stars. The center figure raised one glowing hand. When it spoke, everyone could understand the words, though it used no human language. "People of this world," the being said, its voice like music, "we are the Eternal Ones. We have watched your struggles from the heavens above. Now we come to guide you toward paradise." Do-hyun remained standing. Something felt wrong, though he could not name it. "Why do you come to us?" he asked. The glowing being turned its perfect gaze upon him. "Because you have been chosen. This world holds sacred elements that must be gathered for the great work ahead. Serve us faithfully and you will know peace eternal." Lightning crackled across the clear sky. Thunder rolled without clouds. The gathered villagers gasped and whispered prayers of awe. "Behold our power," the being continued. "We command the very heavens." Above them, lights danced across the sky in impossible patterns. The air itself began to glow. 3 villagers who had been sick with the wasting fever suddenly stood straight and strong, their ailments gone. Yoonji's eyes shone with tears of joy. "The ancient prophecies were true," she whispered. "The Starwalkers have returned to lead us home." Not everyone was convinced. In the crowd, a young man named Tae-hyung frowned as he watched the display. He worked with metal and stone, building tools and weapons for the village. He understood how things worked, how they moved and functioned. Something about the visitors' power bothered him, though he could not explain why. The glowing beings, who called themselves Veltharians, established their first temple that very day. It rose from the ground in hours, assembled by machines that moved like living things. The structure was magnificent, all flowing curves and crystal windows that caught the sunlight. "Bring the sacred stones," the lead Veltharian commanded. "The blue crystals from the deep caves. They are needed for the celestial machinery." The villagers obeyed eagerly. Soon, long lines of people carried baskets full of the precious crystals to the new temple. They sang as they worked, believing they participated in holy work. Days passed. More ships arrived, landing on other continents. Reports came from distant tribes. The Starwalkers had appeared to them as well, always asking for the same blue crystals, always promising paradise in return. Yoonji became the most devoted follower. She organized the crystal gathering, established daily prayers, and convinced neighboring villages to join their holy work. Her father watched with growing unease. "They ask for much," Do-hyun said to his daughter one evening. "And they give much in return," Yoonji replied. "Look, no more disease, no more hunger. The rains come when they call. The earth yields greater harvests. How can you doubt?" Do-hyun had no answer. The evidence was clear. Yet something deep inside him whispered warnings he could not ignore. Across the galaxy, Captain Minho Kim stood on the bridge of his ship, the Endeavor. They were a survey vessel, tasked with mapping unknown systems and cataloging new worlds. The Kepler sector had been on their route for months. "Captain," called Lieutenant Ji-won from the communications station. I'm picking up some strange signals. Very faint, but they seem to be distress calls. From where? That's the odd part, sir. They're coming from the Kepler sector. But our records show only primitive civilizations there. Nothing that should have interstellar communication. Dr. Una Lee looked up from her science station. I'm detecting unusual energy signatures too, Captain. Very advanced technology, but not from any known species. Captain Minho frowned. First contact with unknown aliens could mean anything. Trade opportunities, scientific discoveries, or terrible danger. Change course for the Kepler sector. Full sensors. Aye, sir. The Endeavour turned toward the distant stars, carrying its crew of 43 humans into the unknown. None of them knew they were flying toward a trap that had already snared 12 entire worlds. On Kithara, the Veltharians prepared for the next phase of their plan. Soon, other species would arrive in the sector. When they did, the newly faithful would be ready to defend their gods with their lives. High Archon Tailvesh reviewed the reports with satisfaction. Project Divinity was ahead of schedule. The primitive populations were gathering resources at an exceptional rate, driven by religious fervor rather than force. Commander Heon stood beside him, no longer feeling the guilt that had plagued his early days among the aliens. Humanity had cast him out, left him to die in the Proxima system. Now he served beings who appreciated his skills. Phase 2? He asked. Soon, the High Archon replied, his skin pulsing with pleased colors. Let them gather more resources first. When the time comes, we will give them weapons and purpose. They will fight for us gladly, believing they battle demons to protect paradise. Neither of them noticed Taehyung in the shadows outside the temple, listening to words he could barely understand but somehow knew spelled doom for his world.